The arrival of the shepherd. The first thing Zara Velthari noticed about the human wasn't his simple black robes or the strange metal symbol hanging from his neck. It wasn't even his unusually calm demeanor as refugee transports screamed overhead, carrying the wounded and dying from the Kraxan assault. What caught her attention was how his pale blue eyes seemed to catalogue everything around him with the precision of a military scanner. Father Thomas Kane stepped off the transport with steady movements, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, as he surveyed the chaos of the emergency refugee camp on Nethi's Prime. Smoke rose from the distant capital city where Kraxan dropships had unleashed their brutal assault just hours before. The peaceful Vexarian homeworld, which had known nothing but harmony for 3 centuries, now burned under alien aggression. Zara approached the human priest, her silver blue skin shimmering with the stress patterns that betrayed her emotional state to other Vexarians. As a junior diplomatic attaché, she had been assigned to coordinate with off-world relief efforts. The Terran Religious Council had sent this single representative, which seemed inadequate given the scale of the disaster. Father Kane, she said, extending her hand in the human greeting she had studied. I am Zara Velthari, Diplomatic Corps. Thank you for coming to aid our people. The priest took her hand gently, and for a moment Zara felt something unexpected. Through her species' mild telepathic abilities, she sensed not the peaceful, contemplative mind she expected from a religious figure, but something far more complex. Layers of discipline, carefully controlled emotions, and beneath it all, something that felt like barely restrained power. The suffering of innocence calls to all faiths, Miss Velthari, Kane replied, his voice carrying a strange mixture of gentleness and authority. I'm here to help in whatever way I can. Around them, Vexarian families huddled together in makeshift shelters. Their natural pacifist nature, evolved over millennia of peaceful existence, left them ill-equipped to process the horror of the Kraxan attack. Children whimpered in their parents' arms, while adults stared at the burning sky with expressions of complete bewilderment. Our people don't understand, Zara explained, leading Kane through the camp. We haven't experienced warfare in our recorded history. The Kraxans appeared without warning, ignored our attempts at communication, and began systematic destruction of our cities, our defense force. She paused, her throat tight with emotion. We don't really have one, just a few patrol vessels. For asteroid mining operations. Kane nodded, but Zara noticed his eyes weren't focused on her words. Instead, he was studying the camp's layout, the positioning of the refugees, the sight lines from the surrounding hills. His gaze lingered on a group of young Vexarian males who sat apart from the families, their silver blue skin darkened with shame and frustration. Those young men, Kane said quietly, they tried to fight back, didn't they? Zara was startled by his perceptiveness. Yes, a few dozen tried to organize resistance when the Kraxans landed in the capital. They were unsuccessful, many were killed. The survivors blamed themselves for not protecting their families. For the first time since his arrival, Kane's expression shifted. Something hard and calculating flickered behind his gentle exterior. He walked toward the group of dejected young Vexarians, with Zara hurrying to keep pace. My name is Thomas Kane, he announced to the group in accented but fluent Vexarian. Zara was surprised he knew their language so well. I understand you fought against the invaders. One of the young males, barely past adolescence by Vexarian standards, looked up with hollow eyes. Fought is too generous a term, human. We ran at them with mining tools and ceremonial weapons. They cut us down like grain stalks, we achieved nothing but our own humiliation. Kane knelt down to be at eye level with the speaker. What's your name, son? Kef, Morden. Kef, tell me exactly what happened. Every detail you can remember. For the next hour, Kane listened as Kef and the other survivors recounted their disastrous attempt at resistance. Zara watched, fascinated despite herself, as the human priest drew out tactical details with questions that seemed far too knowledgeable. For a religious figure, he asked about cracks and weapon types, their formation patterns, response times, even the terrain where the fighting occurred. You say they used hovering combat platforms, Kane mused. How high off the ground could you see exhaust patterns? His questions grew increasingly technical, until Zara began to wonder exactly what kind of priest the Terran Religious Council had sent them. That evening, as the camp settled into an uneasy quiet, Zara found Kane sitting alone near the perimeter, staring out at the burning city. She approached cautiously, her telepathic senses picking up that strange, controlled intensity again. Father Kane, she began hesitantly, your questions earlier, they seemed very specific. Are all human priests trained in military tactics? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. Tell me, Zara, what do you know about human history? The question surprised her. Your species has a reputation for ... conflict, wars, violence, territorial disputes. It's one reason the Galactic Council was hesitant to grant humans membership. You're seen as dangerously aggressive. Aggressive, Kane repeated, almost to himself. Yes, I suppose that's fair. But do you know why we fight, Zara? Why humans seem drawn to conflict? She shook her head, genuinely curious now. Because we've learned that sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters. Your people have been blessed with 3 centuries of peace. Mine have never known such luxury. Every generation of humans has faced some form of existential threat. We've been forged in the fires of survival. Kane turned to look at her directly, and in the dim light, his eyes seemed to hold depths she hadn't noticed before. I wasn't always a priest, Miss Velthari. Before I found my calling in service to God and peace, I served my people in other ways. What kind of service? The kind that taught me how predators think, how they move, how they plan, how they exploit. Weakness, he gestured toward the distant city. The Kraxans aren't just random raiders. This attack is too coordinated, too systematic. They're testing your people, measuring your response capabilities. This is just the beginning. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Beginning of what? Full conquest. They'll let you recover just enough to feel safe, then strike again. Each time will be worse, more brutal, until your people either submit completely or are exterminated as an example to other peaceful species. The casual way he delivered this horrific assessment made Zara's skin shimmer with fear patterns. But surely the Galactic Council will intervene. We've sent distress calls. Kane's laugh was bitter. The Council moves slowly, Zara. By the time they organize a response, your people will be dead or enslaved. No, if the Vexarians are going to survive, you'll have to save yourselves. We don't know how, she whispered. We're not warriors. We're scholars, artists, philosophers. Violence goes against our fundamental nature. Kane stood, his movement fluid and controlled in a way that reminded Zara more of a predator than a holy man. Nature can be changed, Miss Velthari. Survival has a way of awakening capabilities you never knew existed. He began walking back toward the camp, then paused. Tomorrow, I'd like to speak with Kef and his friends again, and any others who might be willing to listen. I think it's time your people learned some harsh truths about the galaxy they live in. As he walked away, Zara remained standing at the camp's edge, staring after him. Through her telepathic abilities, she had caught glimpses of his surface thoughts during their conversation. What she sensed there terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. This human priest carried within his mind detailed knowledge of military strategy, weapons, systems, psychological warfare, and combat tactics. More disturbing still, she had sensed a kind of cold calculation, as if he were already planning something that would fundamentally change her people forever. The next morning, Zara arrived at the designated meeting area to find Kane surrounded by nearly 50 young Vexarians. Word had somehow spread overnight about the humans' request to speak with potential fighters. What she saw in their faces surprised her. The hopeless despair of the previous day had been replaced by something she had never seen in Vexarian features. Before, grim determination, Kane stood before them like a teacher addressing students. But there was something different about his posture now. Gone was the gentle demeanor of the priest who had arrived on the transport. In its place stood someone who radiated quiet authority and deadly competence. "My friends," Kane began, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled group. "Yesterday, you told me you tried to fight and failed. Today, I'm going to teach you why you failed, and how to ensure it never happens again." He gestured for Kef to join him. "You said you charged the Kraxans with mining tools and ceremonial weapons. This was brave, but foolish. Courage without strategy is just elaborate suicide." Kane picked up a piece of metal debris and drew lines. In the dirt, the Kraxans use standard predator tactics. They rely on superior firepower and intimidation to break enemy morale quickly. They expect their opponents to either flee or make desperate, disorganized attacks. You gave them exactly what they expected. He looked up at the assembled Vexarians. But what if you gave them something unexpected instead? For the next several hours, Kane began what would later be called the first lesson in the transformation of an entire species. He taught them about terrain advantages, coordinated tactics, psychological warfare, and the art of turning perceived weakness into strategic strength. Most remarkably, he showed them how their natural telepathic abilities, which they had always considered a minor evolutionary trait useful mainly for emotional bonding, could be weaponized into a devastating military advantage. "Imagine," Kane said to the rapt audience, "coordinated attacks where every fighter knows exactly what every other fighter is thinking and planning. No communication delays, no confusion, no friendly fire incidents. You could execute complex maneuvers that would take other species years to master." Zara watched in growing amazement and unease as her people absorbed these lessons with an eagerness that seemed to contradict their pacifist nature. But what truly disturbed her was the look of satisfaction on Kane's face as he watched the transformation begin. This human priest, she realized, wasn't just teaching her people to fight. He was systematically dismantling everything that had made them peaceful and rebuilding them into something entirely different. The question that haunted her was whether this salvation would ultimately prove to be their destruction. As the first day of training concluded, and the young Vexarians dispersed to practice what they had learned, Zara confronted Kane privately. "Who are you really?" she demanded. "And what are you turning my people into?" Kane met her gaze steadily. "I'm exactly who I said I am, Zara, a priest serving a higher purpose. As for what I'm turning your people into..." He paused, looking toward the city where Kraxan ships still patrolled the sky. I'm turning them into survivors. The question is, are you prepared for what that means? The making of Warriors 3 weeks after Father Kane's arrival, Zara no longer recognized her own people. The transformation had been swift and, she had to admit, remarkable. The same young Vexarians who had cowered in refugee shelters now moved through the camp with purpose and confidence that seemed almost alien to their species. Peaceful nature, Kane had organized them into what he called tactical cells. Small groups that could operate independently but coordinate through their telepathic links. What had started as 50 volunteers had grown to over 300 as word spread of the human priest's unconventional teachings. Zara watched from a hilltop as one such group conducted training exercises in the valley below. They moved with fluid precision, communicating silently through their enhanced telepathic network while executing complex maneuvers that would have challenged seasoned military units. Their weapons were still improvised, modified mining equipment, and repurposed agricultural tools, but Kane had taught them to use these crude implements with devastating effectiveness. Impressive, aren't they? Kane's voice came from behind her. He approached with that same controlled grace she had noticed on his first day, but now she recognized it for what it was. The movement of a trained killer attempting to appear harmless. What have you done to them? She asked, not turning round. These aren't the people I grew up with. Vexarians don't think like this, don't move like this. We're not warriors. Kane settled beside her on the rocky outcropping, his eyes following her gaze to the training exercise below. No, you weren't warriors, but you were always capable of becoming them. Every sentient species has the potential for violence, Zara. Yours was simply ... undeveloped. You make it sound like you're teaching them to use muscles they never knew they had. In a way, I am. Kane's expression grew distant. Do you want to know what I was before I became a priest, Zara? What the Terran Religious Council so carefully omitted from my file when they sent me here. Despite her growing unease about this human and his influence on her people, Zara found herself nodding. I was a psychological warfare specialist with Earth's Special Operations Command. My job was to study alien species and determine how to most effectively break them mentally and emotionally during combat. I spent 15 years learning how to turn civilized beings into either corpses or cowards. The casual way he delivered this horrifying revelation made Zara's skin shimmer with shock patterns. You're a war criminal. Kane was quiet for a moment. I've done things I'm not proud of, yes, but war criminal, no. Everything I did was legal under Earth military code and sanctioned by our government. That doesn't make it right, but it makes... It officially turned to look at her directly. After the Proxima campaign ended, I couldn't continue. The things I had learned about intelligent species, about how easily civilization can be stripped away, it broke something inside me. I found religion, became a priest, dedicated myself to peace and healing. Then why are you doing this too? My people? Zara's voice carried a mixture of anger and confusion. Why are you using those same skills to turn us into killers? Kane pointed toward the horizon where Kraxan patrol ships moved in lazy circles above the ruined capital. Because 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected a massive Kraxan fleet moving toward this system. Not raiders this time, a full invasion force. They'll arrive in approximately 2 weeks, and when they do, they plan to exterminate every Vexarian on this planet as a demonstration to other peaceful species. Zara felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know this? Because I know how predator species think. The initial attack wasn't meant to conquer, it was meant to test. They learned that your people pose no military threat, that you have no effective defensive capabilities, and that other species will be too slow to intervene. Now they're returning to finish the job. Kane's voice grew harder. Your choices are simple, Zara. You can remain the peaceful, enlightened people you've always been, and in 2 weeks you'll all be dead. Or you can become something different, something capable of fighting back, and maybe some of you will survive. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the valley below. The training exercise had been interrupted by the arrival of Elder Morvain, the aged leader of the Vexarian Council. Even from this distance, Zara could see the distress patterns flickering across his ancient skin. Kane and Zara hurried down to where Elder Morvain stood, confronting Kef and his training group. The old Vexarian's voice carried clearly in the thin air. This madness ends now, Morvain was saying, his usually calm demeanor cracking with emotion. You have abandoned everything that makes us Vexarian. Look at yourselves, practicing violence, planning death, thinking like the very savages who attacked us. Kef, who had emerged as the unofficial leader of Kane's student fighters, stepped forward respectfully, but without backing down. Elder, with respect, being Vexarian didn't protect our families, it didn't save our cities, it didn't prevent the slaughter of thousands of our people. And you think becoming like them will somehow improve our situation? Morvain gestured toward Kane. This human has poisoned your minds with his savage philosophies. Violence only begets more violence. Kane approached the confrontation with measured steps. Elder Morvain, I understand your concerns, but I'm afraid philosophical purity won't save your species from extinction. The old Vexarian turned his full attention to the human priest. You dare speak to me of extinction? Your species has been at war for its entire existence. How many billions have died in human conflicts? How many civilizations has humanity destroyed? Many. Kane admitted without hesitation. But humanity survived. And more than that, we've grown stronger. More adaptable. More resilient with each challenge we've faced. Your people face the same choice, now that mine have faced countless times throughout history. Kane's voice grew stronger, more commanding. Evolve or die, Elder. Those are the only options the universe offers. Morvain's skin flickered with patterns of deep sadness and anger. And what have we evolved into under your guidance? I see my people practicing killing techniques, planning ambushes, discussing the best methods to cause pain and terror in their enemies. Is this truly survival, or is it simply becoming the monsters we once opposed? The question hung heavy in the air. Zara found herself caught between admiration for Kane's practical wisdom and horror at the transformation she witnessed daily. Her people were indeed becoming effective fighters, but at what cost to their souls? Kane was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested deep personal experience with exactly this moral dilemma. Elder, let me tell you about a human colony called New Geneva. Peaceful farming community, committed pacifists who had fled Earth to escape our violent culture. When the Zelkan horde attacked their world, they refused to fight back. They held prayer meetings instead of strategy sessions. They tried to negotiate with creatures who saw negotiation as weakness. Kane's eyes grew distant. I was part of the relief force that arrived 3 months later. We found detailed records of what happened. The colonists maintained their principles. right up until the end. They died peacefully, Elder. They died with their moral superiority intact. All 23,000 of them. The silence that followed was deafening. Cain let it stretch before continuing. Now, let me tell you about Kepler 4 for 2b, another human colony that faced a similar threat. But when the horde came for them, they fought back. They used every dirty trick, every brutal tactic, every bit of human savagery they could muster. They committed acts that would have horrified their former selves. And you know what, Elder? They lived. Their children lived. Their culture survived to rebuild something better. Cain looked directly at Morvain. Which outcome do you prefer for your people? The Elder's response was barely a whisper. There must be another way. Show me, Cain challenged. Show me how peaceful philosophy stops cracks and battlecruisers. Show me how moral superiority deflects plasma cannons. Show me how enlightened thinking prevents the systematic extermination of your entire species. When Morvain couldn't answer, Cain turned to address the assembled Vexarians. I'm not asking you to abandon who you are permanently. I'm asking you to become temporarily what you need to be in order to ensure there's still a you left to return to your peaceful ways afterward. Keph stepped forward again. Elder, the human speaks truth. We've seen the intelligence reports. A massive Kraxan fleet approaches our world. They come not to conquer, but to exterminate. If we remain as we are, we'll die as we are. If we change, if we adapt, some of us might live to remember what we once were. Over the following hours, the debate continued. But Zara could see that Cain's pragmatic arguments were winning over Elder Morvain's idealistic appeals. The harsh reality of their situation was impossible to ignore. As the sun set that evening, Elder Morvain made his decision. Standing before the entire refugee camp, he spoke words that would forever change Vexarian history. My people, he began, his voice heavy with grief and resolution. For 3 centuries, we have lived in peace. We have built a civilization based on harmony, understanding, and the rejection of violence. This has been our greatest pride and our greatest achievement. He paused, his ancient eyes finding Cain in the crowd. But pride means nothing to the dead. Achievement means nothing if there are none left to remember it. Therefore, I ask our young warriors to continue their training. I ask our craftsmen to forge weapons instead of art. I ask our thinkers to plan battles instead of poems. The old Vexarian's skin rippled with patterns of deep sorrow. We will become what we must become to survive. And when survival is assured, we will remember what we once were and strive to become worthy of that memory again. The transformation accelerated after Elder Morvain's blessing. Within days, the entire refugee population had reorganized itself into a military force. Cain revealed tactical knowledge that seemed impossibly comprehensive, teaching the Vex not just how to fight, but how to think like strategists and commanders. Most remarkably, he showed them how to weaponize their telepathic abilities in ways that turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Coordinated through their mental links, small Vexarian units could execute complex operations with precision that amazed even Cain. When Kraxan advance scouts arrived a week later, expecting to find the same helpless prey they had encountered before, they instead found an enemy that fought with intelligence, coordination, and a desperate ferocity that caught them completely off guard. The scouts were systematically hunted down and eliminated with efficiency that would have impressed human special forces units. More importantly, their deaths sent a message to the approaching invasion fleet. The prey had learned to bite back standing in the command center they had established in the ruins of the capital. Zara watched Kane coordinate defensive preparations with the skill of a master general. The gentle priest was gone, replaced by the military strategist he had always been beneath the religious facade. "You planned this from the beginning," she said quietly. "The Terran Religious Council didn't send you here to provide comfort to refugees. They sent you to assess our potential as allies and to ensure we survived to serve that alliance." Kane nodded without looking away from the tactical displays. "Earth has been monitoring cracks in expansion for decades. We knew they would eventually target peaceful species like yours. The question was whether those species could be taught to defend themselves, or if they would simply become victims. And if we had refused to learn, if Elder Morvain had forbidden the training." Now Kane did look at her, and for the first time since his arrival, she saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. "Then I would have had to implement other options to ensure the Kraxans didn't gain control of your planet's strategic resources." The implication chilled her. "You would have conquered us yourself, if necessary. But this way is better, Zara. This way, your people maintain their autonomy while gaining the strength to protect themselves. Earth gains an ally instead of a colony." Before she could respond, alarms sounded throughout the command center. The main Kraxan invasion fleet had arrived and was beginning its final approach to the planet. Kane's expression shifted to one of cold determination. "Time for the final lesson, my friends. Today, you will learn whether all this training was enough to save your species." As Vexarian fighters took their positions in carefully prepared defensive positions throughout the ruined city, Zara realized that the gentle, peaceful people she had grown up with were gone forever. In their place stood something harder, more dangerous, but ultimately more capable of surviving in a hostile galaxy. Whether that transformation represented salvation or damnation remained to be seen. But as Kraxan dropships screamed down through the atmosphere toward a trap that would have been unthinkable just weeks before, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never underestimate the Vexarians again. Asterisk. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Zara wondered if that had been Kane's true purpose all along, not just to save one species, but to forge them into something the galaxy had never seen before. A race of warrior philosophers who combined Vexarian wisdom with human ruthlessness. If so, she thought, as the first explosions lit the sky, then the universe was about to become a very different place.